Thank you so much for coming out on this hot August day. You're going to hear a lot of interesting information and concerning information. So prepare your hearts and minds. Lord, help our hearts and minds to hear, understand, and perceive, and apply wisdom. In your Master's name, everybody said,
Amen.
Okay, so the lady who needs no introduction here tonight is Ann Stacy, and I've asked her to come and introduce our special guest. Can we show Ann Stacy some love?
Eve Harow is our guest tonight, and Eve, I've known about her for many years. She's a very successful podcaster in Israel. Everyone in Judea and Samaria knows who Eve Harow is. And so she's my friend. She was here in November, and she's back again. So Eve, you want to come up and tell us about your life in Judea and Samaria?
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, all of you, for coming out here today. In April of 2024, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sitting in my living room debating whether I should eat that piece of cheesecake that's left in the fridge from Sabbath. 2 o'clock in the morning, that's not a usual occurrence. But when the Sabbath was out, we got the news that Iran was sending about 300 missiles and who knows what our way. And the Israelis were told, all the emergency services were on high call, and the hospitals and anybody who could be sent out was sent home. We had a few hours warning. So my husband is a physician, but on Sundays is our Monday, so he said, I'm going to sleep. I got patients in the morning. I said, how could you go to sleep? I said, I'm going to sleep. So I'm up, and my son, who at that time was out of the Army for the weekend, and his wife and his baby girl, they were staying with us, and we put them in the safe room. But I'm sitting there, there's only so many Psalms you could, say, and I'm just thinking, what is going on here? And then the alarm, the siren goes off, and all these Israelis run into the safe rooms, and turn on the radio, because we were expecting also the electricity to go out, so we all have these memory radios, little portable things with that. So we all turn on the radios, and I'm expecting to hear like 150,000 people are killed, and the infrastructure's been taken out, and the hospitals, and the reports are coming in, and I think one person was lightly hurt. So I said to my husband, where's our tambourine? He said, we don't have a tambourine. He said, why do you want a tambourine? I said, a drum, cymbals, anything. He said, we don't have any of that stuff. So he said, why? I said, because I understand now what Miriam felt on the shores of the Red Sea when the Israelites go through, waiting to be destroyed, and then God splits the sea for us and then just drowns all our enemy. And everyone is standing there, and the women pick up the musical instruments, and they dance, and they sing, which is also incidentally why Miriam is called the prophetess, because when they left Egypt, they didn't have a whole lot of luggage with them, couldn't even wait to make the bread. So they packed the cymbal, they packed the tambourines and the drums, and that means that they knew. They didn't know how it was going to happen and what was going to happen, but they had faith. They had faith that something was going to be worth dancing and singing for. So that was really a moment in my life where I felt God's presence in a way, like really that I had lived through a miracle. And there have been other times like that in my life in Israel. But we don't count on the miracles. Okay, we do whatever we have to do. Like my kids go into the army, we plant, we work, we do whatever we need to do. And when God decides that there's going to be a miracle, there's going to be. But certainly there has been very, very difficult times, especially since October 7th, but also before, where we didn't, it didn't turn out the way we wanted it to be. So I was invited here tonight, and in addition to just loving Israel, Ann and John, they understand particularly the significance of Judea and Samaria. So I asked, we're okay? So I'm a very visual person. I am a tour guide in addition to podcasts and in addition to trying to educate people and raising 7 children and now got 17 grandchildren, so I'm not as involved with them, but still, still there. They come to me for cookies, for sure. And if the parents say no, I say, the grandmother. So, but I wanted to show you, especially because, in Texas, like, to drive from one city to the other in Texas, you could get from the southernmost part of Israel to the northernmost part of Israel in that time. It is a very small country, the size basically of New Jersey, okay? And so I just wanted to point that out to you, because I'm not so sure that everybody is aware. And also, depending on the point that they're trying to make, the news and the haters are going to take things out of context. I am a maniac about context, with all due respect to the Bible, which for me is the most important text, and not about context, because so often we're not exactly being lied to, but it's not being put in the way that it needs to be put, so it would make sense. And that's very often what's happening now. And so I wanted to just show you, this is a map of Israel. Eilat is all the way down there on the bottom at the Red Sea. Jordan is over on the right. Okay, the Mediterranean is over on the left. But if you see where the triangle is at the bottom, so on the left side of that triangle is the Sinai Desert. All right, so we've got the Sinai Desert on the left, which is controlled by Egypt. And of course, Egypt, even though we signed a peace treaty with them, doesn't exactly keep to that. I think the word peace doesn't translate into Arabic the way it should, but I'm being serious. Salam does not mean peace. And so you see the Gaza Strip there at the bottom left corner. So they have, they've got a border with the Gaza Strip, and that's how all the weapons got into there. And that's where they're not letting the so-called innocent Gazans out. I'm saying so-called because I'm not sure how many Gazans are actually innocent. But Egypt is signed to an international treaty that if there's a war in a neighboring country, you have to take the non-combatants, give them a safe place until the war is over. They refuse to do that, and as a result, Israel has had to fight the Hamas, because October 7th happened right on the Israeli side of the Gaza Strip, where they infiltrated into the western part of the Negev. Israel has had to fight the terrorists who put their children in front of them, and who hide in mosques and hide in schools, and UNRWA, the UN organization, is deep in collusion with them. All right, and we all know about the hostages and how they were hidden in tunnels underneath them. So, and of course, war is terrible, and things happen, and unfortunately, people that Israel did not intend to go after were killed. But every single one of them is the fault of Hamas. And because they don't care about their people, it gives you a tremendous advantage in war to not care about your own people. It really does. While I know too many soldiers who actually were killed in trying to prevent non-combatants from being killed. And I'm sure you all know that Israel's ambassador to the United States, Dr. Yechiel Leiter, who's a friend of mine, his own son was killed. 39-year-old commander, father of 6, had just graduated medical school, and instead of them bombing a building from the air where they knew terrorists were in, they were afraid that they might kill, civilians, so they went in, and of course the place was rigged, and it killed him and some others as well. All right, so and that's why if you ever hear him on the news, he's so impassioned about this, because his page is a terrible, terrible person of Christ for what's happened. Okay, so that's Egypt, and then to the north, of course, we have Lebanon. Just biblically speaking, if you're familiar with King Hiram of Tyre, have you heard about King Hiram? So there are 2 King Hirams of Tyre. The first one helps David build his palace, so he sends his Phoenician workmen to David. And we see actually Phoenician architectural elements in Jerusalem, in an area that we think was David's palace. It's amazing. And then later on, he sends more Phoenician workmen to Solomon to actually help build the temple. So it turns out that until the modern day, we never had a problem with the people who live on that part of the coast, with the Phoenicians. Quite the opposite. It's only when the Muslims took it over in the 1970s, and it was a Christian country. So wherever they go, havoc is wreaked. All right, it's not a coincidence. So now we've got the Hezbollah up in the north, and they are, of course, an arm of Iran. And Hezbollah means the army of Allah. Okay, And like Ramallah, the city of Ramallah means Allah is great. Ram is loud or great. I'm speaking into speaker. This is called a ramkol in Hebrew. All right? So understand how this is there. So, and then near the Golan Heights, on the top right side, we have Syria, which at the moment is kind of falling apart. But, so you can see what our neighborhood is like. But right in the middle, you see Judea and Samaria. Now, when the Jews regained independence in the land of Israel in 1948, and I say that specifically that way because there were always Jews in the land. It was being controlled by somebody else. For 1,800 years, it was controlled by different people. And finally, in 1948, after World War II, and unfortunately after 6 million were killed in Europe because they had no place to go, we finally regained independence. And what you see that's not yellow, like the gray, is what Israel is between 1948 and 1967. That's not what the world gave Israel. They gave us something much smaller, accepted it because we needed something. But in the end, the Arabs did not accept it, waged war on us, and at the end of what we call a war of independence, that's Israel. So for many people, that's Israel. But in 1967, when once again the Arabs waged war on us because we were not supposed to have come into being. All right, this idea of the Jews regaining independence was never supposed to have happened. And it's an insult. If you want to understand Islam, you have to understand how much honor and shame and humiliation are a part of their culture. It's not like that with Jews and Christians. We believe in forgiveness and starting over and compromising and finding a middle ground because we love life. And if you love life, you're going to give a little, and they'll give a little, and then it'll be okay. That's not the way it is in Islam. And you need to understand this. It's a different way of thinking. When they lose a war, they can't just say, okay, we lost the war. They now have to go after you again to win it. You've heard of Sunnis and Shias, the two major branches of Islam. Iran is Shia. Most other Arab countries are Sunni, like Saudi Arabia. They hate each other. They hate each other because of the Battle of Karbala that happened 1,400 years ago. You don't forgive, ever. You don't forgive. And the only way that a war ends is when the enemy is completely routed. So we're coming at them from the West as Israelis, as Americans, and saying, well, we'll find a middle ground here. And so what happens is, in 1967, after they attack, and this is what's called the 6-Day War, which is another miracle. Like, they can't teach it at West Point. Nobody understands what happened in 6 days in 1967. But Israel ends up liberating Judea, Samaria, Gaza, the Golan Heights, and the entire Sinai Peninsula, which later on we give to Egypt in return for a peace treaty. Because there's this idea that they hate us because we took land that they feel is theirs. So how do you repair that hatred? You give them the land, and then they won't hate you anymore. And what some of us were realizing from the very beginning is that this is a religious war with territorial components, but ultimately this is a religious war. This is the need for Islam to have total supremacy, not just over other Muslims, and not just over Jews, but over you. And if you look at the history, let's say call it Europe, okay, of today, the battle in the Mediterranean and in Europe, since the advent of Islam 1,400 years ago, has been a Christian-Muslim back and forth, where sometimes the Muslims winning and sometimes the Christians winning. And what is so appalling is the Christians just let their enemy in the front door. And I don't know if they can stop that anymore. And sitting in Israel, where we have a deep understanding of what's happening because we have no wiggle room. I look at America, and I love the United States. I grew up here. I did not leave the United States because I wanted to flee the United States. I went because I thought, God is calling me home. All right, for the first time in a very long time, my people have sovereignty in the land of Israel, which it says in the Bible God gave to us in an everlasting covenant. How can I sit and have a good life in California when this is what clearly God has asked us to do? Not all my co-religionists have seen it that way. So I feel chosen. I really do feel chosen that I saw this, that my husband saw this, and that we've been blessed to raise our children there. I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It's not easy. But when there's meaning to your life and a bigger picture, if you look at the polls, the Israelis are consistently some of the happiest people on earth. I think we were number 11 last year. And you think to yourself, seriously? Like after Finland, Sweden, Norway, places, New Zealand, like places where nothing happens really, like of great importance, of course they're happy. Israel? I mean, you're surrounded by enemies, you're fighting all the time, there's terrorism, there's awful things. You're happy? Yes, we are happy. Because we have a covenant, an unbreakable covenant. We have a mission. And not all Israelis are coming from a biblical perspective here. Some are coming from a nationalistic perspective, from a people perspective. It's fascinating to see what's happening in Israel. Coming from all different ways of thinking. The Jews who resettled Israel 120 years ago were not really Bible-carrying people. I mean, they carried the Bible, but they didn't necessarily practice some of the tenets of Judaism. But they understood the power of the land of being called home. So it's so interesting to see this ingathering of the exiles, but not for all the same reason. And I see it in my own family, and I see what's happening. Just as an aside, my granddaughter got married 2 weeks ago. And she's an amazing girl. And she married a boy who's raised on a kibbutz, on a very secular left-wing kibbutz, who found God when he was 15 and came back and keeps Shabbat and keeps laws of kashrut. And she's a religious girl, and they met and they got married now. And they want to live in Judea and Samaria, which is the focus of this talk. So we get Judea and Samaria in 1967 and Gaza. Initially, the Israeli government says, well, we're going to trade this for peace. And the Arabs say no. They keep saying no, they keep saying no, they keep saying no. The world keeps saying, well, they don't really mean it, and try again. Like, what, are you kidding? Like, why can't we just believe them? Okay? So what happens then is Jews start moving back into Judea and Samaria. Why am I calling it Judea and Samaria? Because I'm a Judean. Okay, the word in Hebrew for a Jew is a Yehudi. But what that means is somebody who comes from Judea. So for many years, we were a religion because we had lost our land. But now we've come back to our land, and I am a Judean. And Samaria is the northern part. If you look at the little waste there where Jerusalem is, and so the southern part is Judea, and the northern part is Samaria. And we also resettled Jews in Gaza. There have been Jews who have lived in Gaza. We have the floors of synagogues from hundreds of years ago that we uncovered in Gaza. And some of the songs that we sing on the Sabbath were written in Gaza. There was a Jewish presence there. So, when we're the only people who, when we're ethically cleansed from somewhere, someone says, oh, then you don't belong here. So that means that you're okay with ethnic cleansing, only when it comes to the Jews. So we have come in there, and if we can have the next slide, Pastor, it's like kind of a zero in on Judea and Samaria. There you go. So 1 out of every 10 Israeli Jews lives in Judea and Samaria. We are considered settlers, which has become a pejorative term. And it hasn't been easy, and a lot of times our own government is arguing with us, and also did not apply Israeli laws to Judea and Samaria. Okay, for a lot of different reasons, maybe the main one being is that there are Arabs who live there. We're not sure how many because they never die. It's amazing. They never die because when you die, you have to report that you died. But they don't want anyone to know that their numbers are maybe not as big as people think they are. They're so confused because they accuse us of committing genocide and killing them, and yet their numbers keep growing. So it's like, pick one argument, and you can't have two that contradict each other. So this is what's going on. Now, where I live is a place called Efrat, okay, which is just south of Jerusalem. In this area, you see where it says Gush Etzion? Down like to that blue splotch is the Dead Sea. Okay, so just west of the Dead Sea is where I live, in Gush Etzion, and I live in a place called Efrat, which is another name for Bethlehem. I literally look out of my house and I see Bethlehem. Okay, I see where David walked across, because on the other side of the Dead Sea is Jordan, but that's biblical Moab. So if you know the book of Ruth, and one of the programs that Ann and I have been doing now, the Judea-Samaria Experience, has been to try and bring these places out to those of you here by doing different videos. And I did one on the book of Ruth from my backyard. And we just talked about David and about Ruth and about Moab. So she's right, it's all right there. And there's a hill up called Beatam, which is where Samson went to when he annoyed the Philistines just a little too much. He goes and he hides behind Judea. He hides behind the tribe of Judea so they'll protect him. Like I walk the Bible. It's the most unbelievable thing. It really is. I see my forefathers. I understand the history. And when I guide, my Tanakh, my Bible is always in my bag because I'm showing the 3D version of the Bible. And there's no other way really to understand and experience what happened other than going there. You know, there's certain things you can read about and get an idea. You have to fall in love to understand what love is, right? You have to eat really good chocolate to understand what love is. And you just have to be able to go to Judea and Samaria and actually experience it. And 80% of the biblical stories happen in this little area. So why are they coming after us so hard? Because 80% of the biblical stories happen here. And if you're trying to erase the Bible, and you're trying to erase the Jews, and you're trying to erase God, and what he promised so long ago in the book that he gave to the world so that we would behave better, and also not go after idols, then you go after the people who are living it the most intensely. And so every calendar is thrown at us. We're running around killing people all the time. Settler violence, which is maybe a couple of kids who nobody should do anything wrong, and it's wrong. You know, any kind of vigilante behavior is absolutely wrong. But we're dealing with them. By the way, most of those kids don't live in Judea and Samaria. They come from outside of Judea and Samaria because in the absence of Israeli law, Israel, like I said, has not applied sovereignty here, and in the absence of that, in that vacuum, people can get away with a lot of different things. So why wouldn't Israel do that? And a lot of it is because no one knows what to do with the Arabs living there. We don't want to do ethnic cleansing. We don't want to do what they did to us. In 1948, they threw all the Jews out of Judea and Samaria. So when we come back in 1967, we've got to start fresh. Now, in 1967, we could have kicked the Arabs out. Anybody else would have. Anybody else would have. But we didn't want to. We don't want to do that. We want to be compassionate. We really believe in coexistence. But now, this has become a difficulty that we have to go over. And so in 1993, the Oslo Accords give 40% of Judea and Samaria to the Palestinian Authority, which is Yasser Arafat, and essentially Hamas. So the ideology of the PLO, Yasser Arafat, is the same ideology of Hamas. They hate each other, but it's the same idea. It's the same idea of hating Jews and hating Christians, of not caring about their own people, which is why all the money that went pouring in there by good-hearted people, let's make their life better, then they won't hate Israelis anymore. Most of that money didn't get to the little people. Most of the money was pocketed by their leadership. And so you didn't end up repairing anything. And we all know how important education is. You know, I'm sure all of you who are parents, you've made sure that your kids get the education that you want them to have, be it biblical education, be it academic, whatever it is. But their education keeps telling them over and over and over again that the Jews and the Christians, the small Satan, the great Satan, are eventually going to go, and the world will be controlled by Islam. That's what they want to do, the global jihad, and they have a lot of patience. One of the problems we have in the West is we have no patience. We want a meal in 5 minutes. We want, if the internet isn't connecting right away, it's like, what's going on? Waiting 10 seconds to find something. They have a lot of patience. And they don't mind if it happens in 10 or 20 years. They don't mind if a lot of their people die on the way because they don't sanctify life the way we do. They raise their children to feel that if you blow yourself up for Allah, you'll get heaven and virgins and wine. So they raise their kids in a very strictly controlled environment where they don't date and they can't drink wine and all that. And then they manipulate them and say, well, if you only do this, then you get all those things that you want. So I'll just give you one small example from where I live. I was talking to the security coordinator in one of the neighboring villages, the Jewish villages, a few months ago, and he said to me, that they caught a 14-year-old Arab girl who tried to stab a Jewish person. And they managed to catch her before she did. Unfortunately, if you've heard of Ari Fools and other people, we weren't able to catch them beforehand. And they catch her, and they bring her, and they said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, my parents accused me of spending time with a young man, so now my family has been shamed. And therefore, in order to clean my family's name, I figured I had to go out and kill a Jew, and that if I was killed by an Israeli soldier, I'm a martyr. And now my family will get lots of money, the pay to slay that they've got going on, where terrorists actually, the family get money. And my family will be absolved of this stain that I did." And she was just accused of it. She didn't even do it. So our security coordinator was really upset for her. I mean, this 14-year-old girl. So she asked for asylum in Israel. Because she said, "I know the Israelis will protect me." They know that. They're not going to say it on the news, but they know. And he couldn't, I mean, she's not an Israeli, 20% of Israelis are Arabs, but they have a different status, they're Israeli citizens. She's in the Palestinian Authority. And he wasn't able to find asylum for her. They can't all have asylum in Israel. And he told me how sad he was. We had to send her back to her village. He didn't know what happened to her, but we can't take responsibility for everyone. We can't parent everyone. But he was really upset. And so was I when I heard that story, because on an individual's level, we have tremendous compassion for them. But I can't control their society. I can't change their mindset. They're going to have to do that on their own. And I certainly hope that they do, but in the meantime, until they figure that out, we collectively have to protect ourselves from them. Because it's a way of thinking, and it's a way of acting, and waging war that makes no sense. And if you see what's happening now in the Middle East, why is Iran attacking Saudi Arabia? Why? What is going on there? This makes no sense. And then they just get attacked back. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense to them. In their worldview, it makes sense. And we just have to understand that we have to protect ourselves from them. So in Judea and Samaria, we are doing what we can, and we are thriving. And Israel has, in addition to being happy, we also have the highest birth rate in the Western world. And which also makes no sense, right? Because you got wars and kids are going to have to go to the army. But we have very tight bonds with each other. We understand that there's a bigger picture here that we are part of, a very ancient picture and also a future picture. We understand that God possibly chose us for a reason, and He still has faith in us. It's pretty amazing. Like, I have faith in Him, and it turns out He's got faith in me, and has kept us around because we have a job to do. And and we need to do it with our friends, but we need to do it. And we're trying very, very hard. And Judea and Samaria is the heart of all that. And when you go there and you see these places and you understand that these are the 80% of the biblical stories happen in these hills, and it then starts to make sense to you, and the messages of the Bible, which are so profound up until today, every single thing about family relationships and leadership and failures. It's a fascinating book because it doesn't fluff anything up. It's all out there. It's all out there. For me, it's so important because I understand that we're human beings and we need to try and be better tomorrow than we were yesterday. But we all have a role to play in this world. We all have different skills that God has given us, different abilities. Some people will be farmers, some people will be soldiers, some people will be religious leaders, and some people will be teachers. And we all have to find our God-given gift and use it, but use it to make things better. Because you can take your genius and become a terrific thief with it. Those are the choices that God gives us. He gives us something. What we do with it is our choice. And so, with what I've been blessed with, this is what I'm doing. I am steeped in history, both biblical history. I study the Tanakh, the Bible, all the time. But I also have academic degrees, both in psychology and in land of Israel and archaeology. So I can, take people to places and this is what happened here and maybe this is why. And, I'll give you one little example. in the Bible, we have the prophets yelling at everybody for worshiping idols. Okay? So clearly they were worshiping idols. And sometimes, so now, just a few weeks ago in Israel, they find these little figurines, these like female figurines, but they thought maybe they were brought from somewhere else and left here. We don't know. A lot of people come through here. This is like the Venn diagram of the world. I mean, people are in, people are out. We're the eastern side of the Mediterranean empires, we're the western side of the eastern empires. Everybody comes through all the time, which is like a treasure trove for archaeologists. And for the first time, they found a mold for one of the faces of the figurines in Jerusalem, which says it was, meaning it was locally made, the little clay thing. So now that has opened up a whole other thing. But maybe these were just dolls. It's a little female figure. Maybe it was just a doll. Or maybe it was a figure of Astarte. Maybe it was like a pagan goddess that people were praying to, which would explain why the prophets got a little bit out of shape. But maybe it wasn't the Judeans doing it. Maybe they were Canaanites living with us, and it was their influence in their house. So we'll probably never get a definitive answer, but the questions are fascinating, just fascinating. And the lessons for us today on how to behave just resonate all the time, because unlike them, we can read about what happened, right? Like we've got the hindsight, we've got the lessons that can be learned. And while we want to be compassionate and we want to trust people, there also has to be a place where we say, no, I really don't want your children to die, but I don't want my children to die more. And if you're going to come after my children, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you can't hurt them. And it's not a place we want to be in. There's a lot of trauma in Israel, a lot of people who, after October 7th especially, it's the things that we have seen and the things that we have had to live with and help heal are beyond sometimes what the capacity of the human being. But we have found that we have strength in ways that we didn't think that we have. But what October 7th showed us the true face of evil. Because the things that they did, and I hope you all know, without necessarily seeing the films, because sometimes you can't erase certain things, maybe just read about it instead of seeing it, that's bad enough. But the things that they did were beyond what any human being, for any excuse in the world, should ever do to another human. And we are the preview of what will happen here if this isn't stopped. And I think you all know that, and that's why you're in this room. So understanding Israel, coming to visit Israel, getting to know Israel, is not to do me a favor, okay? It's quite the opposite. It's actually, America needs Israel very, very badly. And that friendship, it has to be so strong and have no daylight in between it. And there are too few people that understand that now. Between the TikTok and the Instagram and the 90-second stupidities, the enemies can lie so easily and can manipulate the truth so easily. And we have a more difficult argument and a lengthier argument, and we also demand some kind of intelligence on the other side to understand it, which unfortunately is not as prevalent as we would like it to be. And people are just kind of swept up. And kafia became a fashion statement. Do you not understand what that means? Somebody just showed me a statistic that was appalling. That 40% of Americans between 18 and 24 think that Hamas is okay. What? Are you serious? This is an organization that at least doesn't lie. Okay? They tell you exactly what they're up against and what they want to do. And 40% of American young people think that they're all right. Oh my God, like what is happening here? So we've got a lot of things that we have to do. And I would really suggest that in order to empower yourselves and be able to teach others, to try, if you can, even if you've been to Israel. Look, I've guided for close to 20 years, and I've guided many Christian groups, and usually they just give me the itinerary. They hire me, and they give me the itinerary. And rarely does the itinerary include Judea and Samaria. And so when I can get involved from the bottom up with the itinerary, I say, you're not going to Shiloh? You're not going to the tabernacle store? Seriously? How can that be? And the other places are wonderful. Galilee is fabulous. But these are the places that resonate with biblically oriented people, and you have to go and see. And it's not always easy, And there's a lot of questions that rise up, which is great, because when we stop asking questions, we're in trouble. You know, what Israel means, Yisrael, means struggle with God. We are constantly asking questions. If you're wondering why there's so many Jewish lawyers, I just gave you the answer. We're constantly arguing. But in that arguing, in that debate, is where your mind might get changed, which is fine, or you might understand if you have to defend yourself, then you have to really believe in what you're saying. So I invite you in to argue with us, to see, to experience it for yourself, to come out confused. If you get on the plane home, the same person that you got off the plane, something went wrong. All right? It has to touch you, and you will feel God in places that you didn't necessarily think you would feel Him. All right? Because you will just look around and understand, wow, this is the canvas that this is being played out on. And it's a little sliver of a piece of property. I mean, look at some of the dimensions here. Israel at its narrowest point is 10 miles wide. It's nothing. You go further than that to the grocery store, maybe. We have no place to play around. And what this map isn't even showing is that those are the mountains. Judea and Samaria, the mountains. It just looms over this fragile little Israel. And so make sure your news sources are reliable. Because you speak English, so you have to rely on English sources. So, Al Jazeera has stepped in, and all kinds of very nefarious organizations have stepped in to try and twist your mind. There's a news syndicate called Jerusalem News Syndicate, the JNS. I now started writing feature articles for them, and there you can get the truth. You're welcome to be in touch with me if you have a question, and I will answer. I won't necessarily be able to give you an answer, but I'll tell you what both sides are and what the discussion is. Because we can't afford to not fight this battle. There are just too many people who are saying, like, oh, plague on everybody's house over there. Like, we can't figure this out. I'm going to go upgrade my iPhone or whatever. We can't do that. Because while we play or while we get distracted, the enemy does not take a break, not for a second. And the confluence now, what they're calling the Red-Green Alliance, the confluence between your neo-Nazis, the right-wingers, the liberal progressives whose brains are, they say they're so open-minded. I say, yeah, you're so open-minded, your brain fell out. And the jihadists, and just a lot of people who and the Marxists, throw them in. So you got a lot of people out there who are trying to destroy your country. And if they can convince you that it's just about Israel, then okay, you might look away. And you're going to look away until it's too late. And they're already here, I don't have to tell you. They're already here. And this is not innocent. This is not innocent at all. And what's distressing for those of us who believe in democracy and believe in open societies is that they can be taken advantage of. Under the guise of living in an open society, you have to give freedom of speech. And you have to give the freedom to vote. That's what we all want. But what if the people doing all that are trying to actually undercut that country from within and using our openness in order to destroy us? At what point is that not acceptable anymore? So you're not at that point yet, but it's getting there. And so that's what I'm doing here. It's just really trying to explain to you from the heartland of Judea what is happening, and encourage you to come and see for yourself. I've got nothing to hide. I've got nothing to hide. And you can go into the emergency rooms in Israel, and you'll see many Arab doctors, and an open society, and not an apartheid state, and not genocide, and not a country of colonialist white people. The majority of Israelis are from the Middle East, who got thrown out of the countries they lived in for thousands of years. I've got a son-in-law whose mother was born in Morocco, whose father was born in Tunisia, and they were forced out of their homes, and they came to Israel. Nobody ever talks about them, okay? And that's why the Jews aren't being persecuted in the Middle East, because we're not there anymore, except for Israel. And so you need us, we need you, and I think God is watching us all the time and seeing what we're going to do with the situation, and how we're going to battle for His name, including our own. So thank you all so much for your attention, and if anybody has any questions, I'm here. I think we're okay on time. You tell me.
Good. I'll get Mike
Eve, can you say something about the podcast or the Zoom call that we have on the 23rd with?
With Ilana Shimon? Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that Ann and I have been doing together, as I said, we're doing these live things every month. So Ann is friends with a woman named Ilana Shimon, amazing woman, some of you may know her. And she said, why don't we do the next one with Ilana? I said, fabulous. So I organized with Ilana, I was in touch with her, and on the Thursday we settled on a date and on a time. It's live, so it had to be, I had to be able to get there, and she had to be home. We put it in the calendar. And on Saturday, her house was burnt down. Okay, in Chabad Gilad. It's not clear exactly what happened, but what we do know is it's two so-called Palestinian policemen threw lit cigarettes out of their car. Did they do it just because there was, kind of negligence, or did they understand that in the middle of a hot summer, where everything is very dry, it might cause some damage? Unclear. But as a result, many homes in her community were burnt to the ground, including her home, where she and her husband raised 10 children. He's also not well, and where they hosted people. That's how Anna knows them over the years. So we're going to be having, so then I was in touch with her, and Ann was in touch with her, and I said to her, do you want to put off this video that we're going to be doing? She said, no, absolutely not. I want to do it more than ever. She said, because they're not going to drive us out of here. They're going to try. And one of the things I think that we all need to understand is, in Hebrew, the expression Yirat Shamayim means, I interpret it as awe of God, like the wow in His world and what He's given us. But there are some people who interpret it as fear. And one of the things that our enemies are trying to count on is us being afraid. I'm afraid to go to Israel. There's like a guy on every corner ready to stab you. I'm afraid to go to Judea and Samaria. I mean, we keep hearing about what's going on there. First of all, I want to assure you that I feel safer there than I do in the States. Maybe not in Granbury, but in general. Okay? And I live in a country where if something goes wrong, people will come running towards me, not away. Because even though it makes no sense and they're endangering their lives, they want to help. They want to help. Don't let the enemy win. Don't let fear keep you from doing what you need to do. Okay? Obviously, don't smoke, wear seatbelts, and do safe things. Because, you don't want to say, okay, God, come and get me, I can do whatever I want. You don't want to do that, within the parameters of normal. But where people are going, I drive everywhere in Judea and Samaria. Okay? Because I feel anywhere that there are Israeli soldiers and the Jews are allowed to drive. I will not go into Palestinian Authority cities because they're going to lynch me if I go in. And which is also ridiculous that someone who just makes a wrong turn is going to get killed. It's like, well, what is that? Okay, we had that a couple of days after Imam's house burned down. Some people were going on a hike in Samaria and they were attacked, and 2 people were killed. One of the army guy and one of the security guys who came to help were killed. Now, and everyone said, well, you shouldn't have trespassed. First of all, even if you trespass, that doesn't mean you should be shot. But second of all, they weren't in the village. They were outside the village. But when the Muslims say you have trespassed, because they think everything belongs to them, it doesn't matter where you go, you've trespassed. And settler violence means that you went up to pray on the Temple Mount. So they don't interpret it the way we interpret it, but they know that the audience doesn't understand that. Okay, so now I'm telling you what that means, is that anything we do is an abomination in their eyes, anything. Just my living where I live is already violence. Just because I get up in the morning and I have my coffee and I try to be a good person and my husband goes off to work and he heals his Christian patients, his Arab patients, whoever, because he's a physician. That's the vow that he's taking. He wouldn't have it any other way. So, but that's not how it's interpreted. So I want you to get past that fear. And we all have faith, but we're going to be in this room. So to understand that there's things that you need to do in order to empower yourselves to be able to move that forward. And that even if it means that your neighbors and your relatives are going to say, are you crazy? You're going to Israel? You're going to Judea and Samaria? Haven't you read the news? What is going on? But you're going to say to them, when I come back, I'll explain to you why I went. And then I want you to promise that when I get back safely, you're going to come with me the next time. Okay? And get that down. If you're writing it, he's on tape. All right? And see where that goes. Yes.
How many Christians live in Judea and Samaria?
That is an excellent question because, like Bethlehem's, Christian. Until Oslo in 1993, when it became under the Muslims. And now we know, the last numbers I heard, is that it's gone from 80% Christian to 80% Muslim. Any place in the Middle East outside of Israel that is controlled by Muslims, they persecute their Christians. And you guys need to know this, having nothing to do with Israel. What's going on in Nigeria, what's going on in Africa, and all over the Middle East is that the Christian minorities, every single day they're having an October 7th. It is horrific, horrific. In Egypt, for example, the Copts, are the Christians in Egypt, and they're probably the remnants of the real Egyptians. Okay, I was in Egypt 3 years ago, and we had a Coptic, our guide was a Copt, and he was telling us how terrible it is there. He sends his kids to a Christian school. So in Judea and Samaria, where the Christians that live under Israel are doing fighting in Israel itself, we have about, I think, like 4 or 5% of Israelis are Christians, and they're doing amazing. And they're happy, and they're sending their kids to universities. They have complete freedom of religion. When I take people, for example, into Nazareth, or any of the other places within Israel where I can take people, you just, see, they've got their churches, they've got their freedoms, their holidays, everybody respects the holidays. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, for example, in Jerusalem, it was just refurbished, the archaeologists went in, and everything was made safer because it's a very old building. And that's under Israel, and they're being guarded by the Israeli police. All right, so I'm very proud of that. So I don't know what the numbers are in Judea and Samaria because there are not many Christians who are now living under Israeli rule. Like I said, the ones mainly in Bethlehem, and they are not having an easy time. So yeah.
Are Christians allowed to move to Israel?
Are Christians allowed to move to Israel? No. With certain exceptions. Israel has a law called the right of return, which means that any Jew has the right to come and live in Israel. However, in the standard definition of who is Jewish, in the Orthodox, the traditional way, it's if you've converted to Judaism or if you were born to a Jewish woman. Now, what happened at the end of the 1980s, the early 90s, when a lot of Jews from the Soviet Union finally were let out, so many came to Israel, but they were patrilineal Jews. So according to halakha, according to Jewish law, they're not Jews, but they're Israelis and they live in Israel. And therefore, you do have a significant population in Israel of technically Christians. I don't know what they think of themselves. Some of them think they're Jews, some of them think they're Christians, some of them don't care, they're just Israeli. All right? But, if a Christian applies to move to Israel, it would be very difficult to do that.
Okay, my question is, how is the AI influence over there? Because AI is so massive here in the U.S. So with the regeneration of AI with Islam, are they under attack and fueling the manipulation?
No question about it. AI, like every technology, can be used for good, it can be used for bad. And so if you go on social media, for example, a lot of the responses and the comments are not real people.
Yeah, the bots.
They're bots. But then you read it and you don't know that it's a bot, and you're like, wow, 90% of those comments are anti-Israel. People really hate Israel or hate the Jews. We are being so incredibly manipulated, including like countries like Qatar, who have taken their fortune and infiltrated the universities in America, what I call the poison ivy league. And as a result, many of these kids coming out who were raised in normal homes are now coming out like completely brainwashed as to what's happening. This was not an overnight game. They had a long-term plan that they're still in the middle of. But AI has absolutely exacerbated all of that. You just don't know, not to mention that you could just do Photoshop. So when you're looking at a picture, you don't know if that's real anymore. You don't know if the voice, and it's really scary. And even if it sounds like a voice of reason, all of that stuff's manipulated now. And Israel is not able to keep up with this. We're just not. Also, we got a lot of things going on. And I have my issues with Israeli PR, and I think that we should definitely do a better job, without a question. But it's just overwhelming. It's just overwhelming what's happening. And so most young kids, they just hear, oh, Israel's committed genocide. Oh, Israel's an apartheid state. Oh, Israel hates people of color. And then that's it. And they don't question any further. And it's just not true. Israel's not a perfect country, not by any means. But we are probably better than anybody else. And that is the standard that needs to be applied.
Hello. I just wanted to confirm what you were saying. Me and my friend went over to Israel 3 years ago in July, right before the war started. And it was 2 females, young females, and we felt very safe over there. Never did we feel uncomfortable or persecuted over there. And now when we talk to people, we tell people, when you go to Israel, you know, you're gonna love it. It's just a physical representation of what we feel spiritually here. Because we don't have physical.
Thank you. I did not plan you in the audience. I and also, as an aside, the food is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I went culinary tours, and people like, nobody told me that this is what a tomato used to taste like. It hasn't in years, and oh my goodness. Because the land is blessed. It just is. And it comes out in different ways. It's very special. But thank you for that.
Given the insanity that's going on in New York, do you anticipate a lot of Jews up in New York making Aliyah?
Some of my co-religionists are, I get very upset with, let's put it that way. I would hope that they would want to move to Israel. Making Aliyah means moving to Israel, means moving up. I would love if people came, but I don't think a lot of them will. You know, my personal background is that my father was born in Germany in 1932. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, my grandfather said, we're going to need to get out of here, and actually moved them to British Mandate Palestine, which is never, there's no such thing as a Palestinian state. It was British Mandate Palestine. It was named that by Hadrian because he was trying to erase Judea. So actually, sometimes I'll start a talk saying, my father's a Palestinian. Everyone says, oh gosh, she doesn't look like her. And I say, well, the Palestinians were actually Jews up until 1948. So my grandfather had the understanding, but the rest of my father's family did not. They were like, oh, this will blow over, it's just a blip, and whatever. And of course, by the time everyone realized that this was not a blip, they couldn't leave. And we know what happens in Europe, you know, until 1945. So sometimes I look at the news today, and I got Yad Vashem, which is the museum to the Holocaust in Jerusalem, and I walk through there, and I'm like, wow, this could be right out of today's headlines. And it's very frightening because we have the preview, we know what happened. So, and I try and explain to Jews, like, guys, we know what's going on here. But many of them have sadly left their Jewish roots. Their Jewish roots are not as important to them as I feel that there should be. And liberalism, for some of them, is their religion. Liberalism is great. I consider myself a liberal in the true sense. I just want everybody to have a good life and live and let live. But they've adopted it in an extreme way, and I embarrass them. I'm like the crazy uncle in the attic. You know, but like that's not my Jew. She's out there and she's fighting for the land, but she's not. I don't relate to that. Not understanding, but I'm also fighting for them. And that's hurtful. I'm being very honest here in front of you, but that's very hurtful to me as a Jew. But when you look through history, you know, they say only 20% of the Israelites left Egypt. And all through history, not everybody has woken up in time to understand what's happening. That's why there's so few of us, relatively speaking, considering that we've been around for a very long time. You know, we should be like, how many Chinese are there? We should be about there, and we're not. So it's kind of survival of the fittest, and I hope that they wake up, and we do our best. But, you know, they're going to make choices of their own. I hope they make the right choices.
I'm just curious how many Jews in the United States, or let me rephrase that, has that dropped off as far as practicing Jews because of the association with Israel and what's happened in the past, or is that growing? What's going on here?
So I don't. If a Jewish person in America chooses not to raise their children Jewish or marry someone of a different faith or just leave faith altogether, I don't think Israel can be blamed for that. You know, like if you were a solid Jew, like every religion has its nutcases. I'm sure that not every Christian that you meet you would want in your family. Like, we're people, right? So if they're going to say, well, I broke with Judaism because I don't like that Eve Harow decided that she needed to settle in an area that somebody else claimed, well, then your Judaism really wasn't rock hard to begin with, I'm sorry. If you want an excuse, you can always find an excuse. And unfortunately, in every religion, you know, we meet, I've met a lot of Laos Catholics because of things that priests did in the church that took advantage of the people, the parishioners. You know, that's terrible, but, you know, because people are associated with things. But, you know, maybe we can, you know, try and see past that. So, you know, I would hope that that's not it. I also know that there are Jews who are quite proud of what Israel has accomplished. And instead of, for a long time, Jews kind of laid low because we were being persecuted in so many places. So let's just like lay low. This pogrom will end, and this Nazi will end. And now, Jews can stand up and be proud because we came home, so clearly God is still on our side. And we're tough now. Like if you come to Israel, the Jews you see in Israel are very different than the Jews you know in America. They stand up really straight. They don't swagger, but they have a confidence because they know they're home. I'll tell you that my 15-year-old granddaughter, I can't get shoes on her. This girl is, because she lives in Samaria, the hills are hers. She's like rooted in a way. When you're home, you know, you get home, you kick off your shoes, you walk barefoot in the kitchen to get a coffee, because you're home. They're home. This generation, these Jews, you know, are like, the Israelis are a different breed of Jew than you're familiar with. Because we understand that there's something big going on here. We don't always like it. But there's something about that infuses you with something very, very strong. I think Israelis are beautiful. I think I live among unbelievable heroes on so many levels. And I'm not just talking about the soldiers. I'm talking about their lives. When my son goes off to reserve duty, my daughter-in-law's got to cope with everything on her own at the house. That's not so simple either. I'm talking about the inventions that are coming out of Israel. Because we want to make the world a better place. We're constantly thinking, what can we do? What can we do? What can we invent that'll make this better, that'll cure cancer? It's like, look what's going on with the Israeli economy if you're paying attention. Even in the last few years of war, people are investing in Israel. The big companies, now they're not doing that out of charity. Big companies are not ideological. They want to do well. And they're investing in Israel. There is, every single big company in the world has a branch in Israel. But they get a lot of bang for their buck because they know that there's something, you know, that we just is bursting out. We understand, this is how I really feel, that God wants us to shine. And so He's given us an ability to shine. We have to defend ourselves, that's for sure. But within that perimeter, you can't stop us. And again, it's not just for us. We really believe in making the world a better place in whatever abilities we have. And it's an incredible place to live because of that. And it doesn't mean that it's not hard, and it doesn't mean that bad things don't happen and we disappoint each other and we infight and all of that stuff. It's one big dysfunctional family, really, in every way. But it's something that I think will inspire you. Because to some degree, I think America had that and lost it. Because too many people here don't appreciate America. This is a great country. And many people sacrifice and continue to sacrifice to keep this great. Do most of the young people in this country know that? Do they understand how hard it is to keep this going? And that they're not entitled to it? It is so fragile. So fragile. So in Israel, we understand the fragility. We're not given an opportunity to think otherwise. And so coming to Israel will, I think, inspire you to try and bring that back here and say, hey, like we've got a really good friend over there that is showing us the way. And, you know, the Jews and the Christians, and maybe people of other faiths as well. There are good people in all faiths. Just have to find them and give them the strength to be able to speak up and not be afraid. That's some of what I'm doing here as well. And to be strong like that. You know, not arrogant, but just like understanding that God is out there, that God is good, and that we need to play this role in whatever, you know, time span that we have, and to make sure that the bad guys don't get to rule the day. Yes.
I was in Israel when the war started.
Oh my.
We had been there 2 weeks, and we were going to be leaving on Monday, and
This
the
was
war
Saturday.
started on Saturday. But the whole time I felt safe, all the time. I felt
Even
safe.
with all the craziness.
Yeah, and even with the craziness, it was so weird because even the Jewish people were out there taking pictures of the drones being blown up, you know.
Probably not the
And we're all out
smartest
there
people.
going,
Yeah.
you know, but, you know, the one thing that really got me while I was there is I really realized, I called my husband and told him, I want you to know that a war has broke out, but I want you to know that no matter what happens to me, I am okay. And he goes, but I'm not okay.
Right.
So well, you need to get okay because I am okay.
Right.
I was ready. I
You
didn't know
just-
what would happen.
Exactly. You just, you feel that something, whatever it is going to be.
Yeah.
We have learned to let go of a lot of ideas that we actually control anything. I didn't know if I was going to be here today, because I didn't know if America was going to attack Iran and they were going to shoot us in Israel and close the airport down. Until my granddaughter actually stood under the wedding canopy, we didn't know if the wedding was going to happen. A lot of his friends, because she married a soldier, couldn't get there because they were called to base. So what you end up doing is appreciating every moment, which is what we should do anyway. Okay? Because you don't know, and you just say, okay, I'm going to sit with this now. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? Thank you, God, for today. Thank you for these moments, and really, really appreciate it. You know, Jews are into blessings in like an insane way. I mean, we've got a blessing after we leave the bathroom. I'm serious. I can teach you too if you want. But we really, we bless our food, we don't take anything for granted. Because until you've lost it, you didn't realize you had it. So we're going to appreciate that we have it even before we've lost it. And that, I think, is a very important message that people need to hear.
We're heading to Israel September 1st.
Oh, amazing.
We're doing, you know, a lot of the Christian ongoing Valley of Armageddon, Jerusalem,
Fantastic.
Sea, and all that. So will we be crisscrossing in?
You're going with a tour group?
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly. You should ask them. You should say, listen, are we going to Shiloh? I pronounce it Shiloh. And if they say no, say, well, why? And I'll tell you right, the answer is it's dangerous, and we don't have insurance, and that's, okay, Unfortunately, they don't want to, do anything a little adventurous. But as a result, you don't get to experience the place. And you don't, like, I'll give you a spoiler alert. When you drive from Jerusalem to Shiloh, which is in the middle of Samaria, you are going to pass, or hopefully you'll pass, Arab mansions, enormous homes. You're going to pass on the road their cars that have white license plates, Land Rovers, beautiful cars. And you're going to pass little houses where the Jews live and beat up jalopies where the Jews are driving. And you're going to say to yourself, one second, I was told that like it was the rich Jews and the poor Arabs, except that's all I'm seeing. So there are some people who don't want you to see that because then you might start questioning a whole lot of other stuff. And there are just some people that are just they've got their template for a Christian tour, and it's Jerusalem, and it's Bethlehem, and it's Galilee, and all that is super important, and Jericho. But there's other places that you need to see too. And because Bethlehem is now under the Palestinian Authority, you're not going in there with someone like me. You're going to go in there with a guide who, even if he understands what I've said, can't say it to you. Because if you would say, oh, this guy George just told us that actually Israel's really good to them, he might get killed. Because they live in a fierce society. So you have to put in question marks everything that you're going to hear from them, which is very distressing.
We'll ask for sure.
But ask. Look, I can stand up here and I'm probably painfully honest with you here right now because I feel like I have no choice. It's not easy for me, because there's a lot of things here that are disturbing to me also. But I live in a free society. So somebody else might yell at me and like, why did you say that? But I have the right to say it. But within the Muslim world, they don't live in a free society. It's a fierce society. So if they like us and they say that, they could get killed. And if they don't like us, then, but they can't, but it's sad. It's really ultimately very, very sad. Yes, ma'am.
In 2023, I wanted to go to visit Israel, but I was told that I had to have a COVID vaccine.
Oh, God, COVID, yeah.
Is that still the case now?
No, absolutely not. Thankfully, that was horrible those years. No, Israel very much shut down, too much so. I mean, my husband's a physician, and I'll say to him, come on. And he actually also now, because initially he said, no, we need to take vaccines and whatever. And I said, but we don't know what's in that, and we don't know what's going on. And he said, well, I'm a doctor, I have to believe in medicine. And now he's not running. He got a big wake-up call there also about how manipulated we were. So fortunately, Israel, no, absolutely not. You have to get some kind of visa, and you have to whatever, but the whole COVID thing is done.
Yeah, the gentleman that asked about, are you going on a trip, did you say, to Israel? Yeah. From the time that I first went in 2001, just a few weeks after 9/11, I thought, because I went to Judea and Samaria, because we were the only group in Israel at that point, and it was a Christian group. We had about 150 people. It was amazing. It wasn't a bucket list, and most, I'm sorry to say, Jewish and Christians are bucket list, and been there, done that. And I sort of saw it, and I'm not going back. So the Texans for Safe Israel is something I was the chairman here in Texas of Americans for Safe Israel, which is a Jewish group. And so about 7 or 8 years ago, we created Texans for Safe Israel. And we've had a couple of trips, and we'll be going again, and Eve will be our tour guide, actually in October, the end of October, with Americans for Safe Israel. We go a few days ahead, we stay a few days afterwards. The core of it will be October 20th through 28th. And it just so happens that our longtime Jewish friend happened to show up today because he was at a conference. He's from Chicago, but we've been touring for 15 years in Judea and Samaria. So I said all that to say this. Last year in May, I was sitting with a well-known Israeli, and I said, I wish we had if we could just have a Texas-Israel embassy where Texans could find out where to go, how to go to see the heroes, the heroines, the pioneers, the settlers, if you like, in Judea and Samaria, because it'll change everything. It will change everything. So he said, and nobody is going to go to brick and mortar place. Today he said there's something called the internet. So Texas for Save Israel has invested $65,000 thanks to some of the people that are here today. And we have 2 websites. One of them, did you all get one of these cards? You have one? Okay, if you'll go to Judea and Samaria Experience, you can see that this is Eve. And then this other lady is Franny Watson, and she does a weekly Zoom call with the pioneers, and she did one with you. I think you were the first one.
I was the first one.
You were the first one. Pioneers and the heroes, the heroines. But if you go to Judea and Samaria Experience, if you just look it up, part of it will be the podcast. There's also a podcast that has, I think we've done 20 of them, with the people that are great heroes. They're heroes and heroines. But we will tell you, so the one with Eve, I don't know how they did, but we were saying that you would have been Ephraim. If someone wanted to get to Ephraim and you're the first thing you should be asking, are we going to Judea and Samaria? Mm-hmm. And if they're not, why not? Why can't we go there? So if you want to go to some of the places that these 20 podcasts are about, then you just go and say, log on to Judea Samaria Experience and fill out the little form, and we will get right back to you. It's not me. I mean, we're Texas for Save Israel. It's just supplied the funds. But the Israelis will get back to you from Judea and Samaria, and they will hook you up with a vetted guide like Eve. So, if I cannot encourage you, if you have a trip, ask where it's going, because you're the one paying for it. Why would you not go to where the Bible took place? And if you want to help Judea and Samaria, you want to help the Jews, do this. Insist on it. Say, why can't we do this? Well,
And if they say no, stay another day or 2. Do it on your own. That's also okay. You don't have to fly back with them. Say, you know what, I want to extend my trip, and I'll do this. I'll get a private guide, whatever it is, and I want to see these places. Don't let them dictate to you what you can do. If you're ready there, take advantage of it.
Number 6, the Lord bless you.
You want me to do the lesson?
Yes, you can do it in Hebrew. You can explain it first, whatever you want.
Okay.
Okay, so don't rush off. You got questions, comments, you can meet Eve afterwards, but I've asked her to conclude this part of the meeting with the Aaronic blessing. Is it actually called the Shema? What's it called?
The Shema. So the Shema is a different prayer. The Hero Israel, our Lord our God, our Lord is one. That is like the one sentence for Jews that we say that declares our faith in God. Technically, you're supposed to say it right before you die. Not everybody gets the chance to do that. But many Jews have said that. Unfortunately, over the years, we had to die for our faith. So now we're living for our faith. I think we've had enough of dying for our faith. And I think we're going to live for our faith. And so, the Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, is how you say it in Hebrew. And we believe that with all our hearts, and we believe that He hears it, and that through us, the world is going to be blessed. And we take that very, very, very seriously. It's not just a throwaway line. And so that way you...
The Aaronic blessing. What's it called?
So I'm not a Kohen. I'm a Levi. Okay, I'm a Levite, so a daughter of a Levite. I'm trying to think how to say it because when we give our children that blessing, but it's a slightly different version for boys and for girls. So let me just think. יברכך השם וישמרך, יאר השם פניו אליך ויחונך, יישא השם פניו אליך וישם לך שלום. That God should shine His grace on you and give you peace. Give us all peace. This is straight out of the Bible. This was written a very, very, very long time ago, and we're still there. We're still holding that banner up, and we've come home. Which, if that is not a sign of God, I don't know what is. That the Jewish people came home again. It's just sometimes really overwhelming and a true privilege to be alive in this time for all of us. Thank you so much.